Are you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose we haven't really done any of the back and forth that Henry and I do, but I suppose that's because, Henry and I would kind of catch up. You
Yeah,
and
and
I
I mean, I'm I'm with you every day, We would just
Yeah.
like catch up on, I guess, I don't know. How was the last 5 minutes? Good.
Good, I had a nice sip of coffee.
Good. I'm glad.
But no, let's jump into it.
Perfect.
Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and I'm joined today by my lovely wife and bud in all things, Lauren.
Hi.
Today we have our back to school episode for y'all. This is episode 185, and I decided to do something kind of cool and take a look back at the sort of birth of the teenager, both culturally and cinematically. So for our back to school episode, as people have been returning to school this week from Labor Day and things like that, we're going to be looking at Rebel Without a Cause and Blackboard Jungle, both from 1955. One in color and in CinemaScope, one black and white. They're both very different films, but they're both kind of covering similar issues that had been talked about at large during that time. We're also going to be talking about, of course, the new Matrix trailer that recently dropped, Matrix Resurrections. And we might even talk the Malignant trailer. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that we've been watching. And we'll also probably talk a little bit about Through That and 9/11 as well, because we have been watching a little bit of 9/11 related content. So, our first film is going to be Rebel Without a Cause, of course starring the iconic James Dean. And we do, as always, have a clip. So take a listen.
You know what kind of drunken brawls those parties turn into. It's no place for kids.
A minute ago, you said you didn't care if he drinks.
He said a little drink.
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
Girls don't love their father. Since when? Since I got to be 16?
Stop that!
I love you, Jim.
That was Rebel Without a Cause from 1955, directed by Nicholas Ray, written by Stuart Stern and Nicholas Ray, loosely an adaptation of Irving Shulman's work, and the premise is a rebellious young man with a troubled past comes to a new town, finding friends and enemies. It stars James Dean, Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo, Jim Backus, Ann Doran, Corey Allen, and it even has a very young Dennis Hopper. As I said in the intro, the idea behind this was kind of to talk about the origin of the teenager. Teenagers are in the news often. I taught teenagers for a year, and I think it's an interesting pocket of culture that has sort of sprung up in America, and you can trace its roots and see how it's so similar and how it's so different across time. So I wanted to sort of go back and examine those roots cinematically. And I love research. My wife knows this. Some of you listeners know this. And I started by going back to my old cinema history David Cook professor's textbook, History of Narrative Film, the 4th edition. Great book, by the way, if you don't have it. And, I knew that the teenager, even though adolescence and a teenager as a concept had been around before modern time, the concept of like a modern, hoodlum teenager sort of thing really came around as part of the post-war culture, of post-war referring, of course, to World War II. Mm-hmm. And I decided to look into the textbook, and I got absolute, complete sort of confirmation from this. He writes in the book about how the later part of the 40s and going into the 50s had this sort of snap effect where the high of the American war wore off, and instead there was sort of this emptiness and this upsetness and this sort of snap effect reaction that trickled down into all pockets of the culture. And also at this time you now had children, working less in the workforce. You had, families that had cars and things, and you had like the sort of, post-war boom of the economy turning around, but on a social level, there was a lot of upsetness, and there was also a certain amount of distrust and paranoia, because that's when you start to run square into McCarthyism. And it's through all of this is a very long way of saying that essentially what ended up happening is you had a lot of young people who had this very tumultuous social surrounding and a lot of time on their hands to think about it and their place in the world. And it ended up sort of, I think, leading to a lot of that classic teen stuff that we hear about, 50s kids doing drag races. And
nice
actually,
fights.
yeah, and actually at this time you have a huge, and most people don't recognize this, you actually have a huge teenage pregnancy boom in the 50s. And it's because kids are, getting into mischief with each other and fooling around and being teens.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole old adage, the idle hands.
Yeah. And so one of the teen icons was James Dean. Probably the teen icon was James Dean. He was a guy that every woman wanted to be with. He was a guy that every guy wanted to be, he was emotional, but he was also cool, like it was this weird balancing act that he fought when he had to, and
he was like the sensitive bad boy, he's approachable, but like also, you don't take him home to mom.
Yeah. And I think that it's very interesting, and so I was also looking in the textbooks, and what you end up seeing is this rise of social consciousness films, as he refers to it, and semi-documentary films, where they go and try and focus on these very specific issues like alcoholism, mental illness, and he specifically cites juvenile delinquency, including Nicholas Ray's Knock on Any Door from 49. So from 49 all the way to 55, Nicholas Ray was kind of doing the same thing, and that brings us to Rebel Without a Cause. So would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, I can take it away, I guess. I mean, honestly, I don't really know much about James Dean's career or anything like that, other than the fact that, like, he is an American icon of sorts. I don't know anything, else about the man, about the life he lived, or about the other works that he's done. He's just kind of like he's like the Mona Lisa. Like, it's a painting, at a certain extent. I liked the movie. I liked it a lot. I think that of the two, I think I might prefer the latter one that we'll talk about later. But, like, I think that this movie does a really interesting view of what it's like to be a teen in the 50s in this kind of, like, melodramatic world of LA. And, yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Okay. No, that's good. I agree with you. I think I also prefer Blackboard Jungle, but we'll get into that a little bit more, I think, later. I liked Rebel Without a Cause a lot. It's one that I had heard a lot of and seen clips of, but even honestly, like, going through film school, it wasn't one that I saw. I ended up seeing something completely different from this time, actually, that was another kind of, like, thematic, thing But that one was pointed at the pharmaceutical industry, and it was about this husband that, like, takes, like, this heart medication that makes him go, like, mad. But anywho, that's neither here nor there. So, but this one was one that, like, I had managed to just completely avoid for forever.
So this was your first time seeing this as well?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that it was good, you know. In many ways, I think it lived up to a lot of the hype. I think that this, to me, I think, was cinematically one of the closest things that we've come to with a adaptation of Catcher in the Rye. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of those similar themes in Catcher in the Rye with this character, this sort of malaise with life. What's it all about? This kind of teenage nihilism. This
so much AIDS.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this story manages to really capture it very well. What's interesting is watching Dean's performance. You know, I think there are times where he's really, really great, and it's probably the times where his emotions are at their largest, I think, most of the time. When scenes are heightened in any particular direction, whether it's extreme good or extreme bad, I think that's probably when he's at his best.
Yeah.
But I think that he did do a great job, and I understand why people were kind of attracted to him. He does have this weird charisma, even if I don't think that his performance is necessarily the best overall performance given in the film. I do think he has this charisma that draws you in. I think the movie, and this is just sort of speaking critically, varies for a moment. I do think the movie drags kind of a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say that that's fair.
It all takes place over the course of, like, 24 hours, essentially, and, like, what a long day. The world's longest 24 hours.
I don't think that we see the main character, I don't think that we see him sleep, like, the entire time. I think that that's kind of why he feels a little, like, drunk half of the time. Yeah. It's just because, like, maybe he's just so tired.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I do think that this movie definitely hit a really interesting zeitgeist. What I found extra interesting, though, when I decided to do a little digging, is this movie was sort of handed around a little bit. There was an Irving Shulman treatment and, like, early draft of the script, I guess, that it ended up being what Stuart Stern went on to write. Okay. That's also based off of some Nicholas Ray story notes on the idea.
All I'm hearing is a lot of people had their hands on this.
Oh, I'm not even done yet. So apparently, though, what all this actually comes from is actually another book that shares the title, Rebel Without a Cause. But what's interesting is that book supposedly comes from a psychologist or a psychoanalyst of some kind. And it was Rebel Without a Cause, the hypnoanalysis of a criminal psychopath. And he, apparently, in that book, described the psychopath as someone incapable of exertions for the sake of others.
Okay, wow.
And apparently, like, literally almost none of his book is actually in Rebel Without a Cause. It's, like, just the title. But I think that at the core, you get some of the idea. Some of the whole thing is this guy who keeps on getting thrown into these situations where he has to do things, and is he doing them for him, or is he doing them for other people, and why is he doing them? But I think that it doesn't really get too much deeper than that.
I mean, I think that some of the characters are a little what we would call not stable in any real
yeah.
I don't know. So I feel like that maybe probably translates a little bit more than I think they meant for it to.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I can say without completely, like, spoiling it.
Well, look, the movie's been out since 1955. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, the kid kills puppies.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I wanted to... I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So, real quickly, let me just say this. The movie is definitely worth the watch, and, like, it's a good movie. It's honestly not a bad movie in any way. It drags a little bit, but for the most part, it's a really interesting slice-of-life movie with some good performances all around. And that's kind of my big, broad, technical brushstroke of the movie. It is a little clumsy with some of its, I think, technical aspects, but that's just because it was using two pretty new methods at the time, Technicolor and CinemaScope, both of which were kind of like cutting-edge technologies at the time that were pretty limited. Mm-hmm. So it definitely is visually not always, like, even as striking as other films of the time, but I think that it's an interesting cultural touchstones for performance, and that kind of thing, and that's just sort of my big, broad, analytical overview. Mm-hmm. Getting into what I think is really interesting in talking about the movie, you mentioned the killing of the puppies. There are a lot of things in here that when you look back at them from a modern lens, color certain things about this movie very differently.
Yeah.
So this movie was done in 1955, where the notion of, like, of a sociopath in the context that we sort of have pop culturized the notion of a sociopath, that didn't really take form until the 70s. Mm-hmm. And moving into the 80s. And one of the classic things that everyone talks about is the harming of animals. We've got a kid here who is 100% like the archetype of the person who becomes, like, a psychopathic serial killer. He's like the classic sociopath build. He has a history of harming animals at a young age. He's supposed to be... The actor himself was like 15, 16 when he did this. Yeah. So, it's this character named Plato. His nickname is Plato. And, which is also interesting. He monikers himself, but that's neither here nor there, because he doesn't have friends, so no one gave him that nickname, I imagine. No, he monikers himself. He harms animals. He's isolated. He's a pathological liar. And then you look at his home life. He is from a wealthy background, but his mother is cold and blames him for things that have gone wrong in their life, and has abandoned him, and his father is gone, and
he lives with, like, the housemaid or whomever his caretaker is.
He's raised by, like, essentially just the housekeeper at large, Yeah. She does everything. And so it's this weird, interesting, he's like the mold that people talk about of certain kinds of serial killers, these directionless, parentless people who had all of the signs that they were unwell early and ends up acting out. And he does in this movie. He ends up acting out. He ends up latching onto James Dean in a very unhealthy way. Yeah. And then he ends up, James Dean has pissed off this group of rebel people who were kind of just as, violent, but in different ways, more overt ways.
Yeah, the gang, I guess we would call them. Street gang, teen gang.
And so they come to attack, and it ends up leading to the kid, having a gun and shooting someone. And it's all just this very melodramatic sort of look. It did remind me on a certain level of... And I don't necessarily condone the show on any level, and I guess I can't necessarily say that on a certain level I condone this movie. Parts of it reminded me of certain elements of 13 Reasons Why. Because, like, in season 2, there's, I know this because of my brother's girlfriend.
To clarify, for all those out there. I do not
watch 13 Reasons Why. So, there's, like, a school shooter who comes to the school. Oof. And what ends up happening is, like, a group of the kids, it's during a dance, and what ends up happening is, like, a group of the kids decide that they're gonna go and try and, like, talk the shooter down. And it's the worst idea that you could ever have.
And yes.
But that's kind of the same exact thing that happens here. This kid ends up having a gun, shoots a kid, blames James Dean, maybe is gonna kill James Dean because maybe he loves him, maybe he wants him to be his dad. And he ends up running off, and James Dean is like, I know, it's my fault, so I've gotta be the bigger person here and go and get him and help him out of this jam. And so he sneaks into the back of the observatory.
Yeah, even though the police are there, and there's, like, somebody trying to talk him down from the outside with a megaphone, but, like, James Dean's like, I got this, fam. Don't you fret.
And so he ends up going in and talking this kid down. And so there's so much about this movie that in a modern context is so fascinating to recontextualize and put in a different perspective. And it's kind of hard at times to almost go and get into, even though we are all teenagers at times in our own ways, you know, and we all act out and act as teenagers. Everyone has acted like a shithead teenager. That's just a fact. But, you know, it's all the varying ways, and so it was interesting to go back and try and put yourself into the feet of these people and their emotional headspace and try and empathize and connect and understand with where they were coming from.
Even though it was out of time, honestly, because a lot of the things that they would use as a means of, like, affection or to explain the transition from being a child to this weird bubble that is teenagedom, that's not adult, but is also not, you know, you're not a baby anymore. It's interesting to try and pull yourself, I guess, into that headspace more and, like, bring it into more, you have to, I guess, bring it into a more modern sense, because otherwise a lot of the stuff in there, I was like, oh, that's a choice, you know, just looking at it at the bare bones of what this movie was presenting itself to me without any of my prior knowledge of the 50s. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And I think that you talk about that strange, it's trying to capture that place of, to borrow like a joke, I don't know where it came from. I can't remember where I heard it. There's this kid that's standing around shaking and crying, and they're like, you know, what's the matter? And the kid's like, well, or the kid's not crying. The kid's just standing there shaking, and the kid looks like they want to cry. And someone comes up and is like, what's the matter? And the kid's like, well, my dad says that I'm too old to cry, and my mom says I'm too young to swear.
Oh. Yeah, that's kind of where this movie sits a little bit.
Well, and it's because really, not only because of the post-war boom, but because of social change where now there were child labor laws and things like that, but also economic prosperity and a middle class existed, you did suddenly have a whole group of people who for the first time didn't have really much of anything to do, because it used to be you were a child and you did just a little bit of work until you eventually kind of got to be a teenager, and then you did a lot more work.
Yeah.
You know, and you worked alongside adults in adult jobs.
And now we've changed the game.
Yeah, you know, for the first time, it was understood that, like, no, you were going to take the time to slow down and fill your brain and not do adult things. And so it ended up creating this kind of, I think, you know, that weird, well, now what? And I think that there have been times all throughout history where certain shifts have now created this attitude of, well, now what? You know, when nomads finally shifted to society, I'm sure that there were a lot of people who were like, now what do I do? I had so much walking time.
Yeah. Do I feel that with sitting now? I don't know.
I've gotta do something. You know, that kind of thing.
And then they started thinking, and that was a whole crazy new stuff started happening then.
So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
You know,
I get you.
But I think that also gives us a perfect sort of segue to our next film, which explores it in another kind of light. Blackboard Jungle. Let's before
rate
we
this bad boy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, since you started, go ahead. Out of 5.
Out of 5. Oof. I'm gonna give this movie, I think, a 2.
Ooh.
Like,
Damn skills.
and I don't mean that, I guess, in a negative sense, but, like, I have to give this movie its dues for how age has affected it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some things have not aged well with this movie, and while I think it is a really interesting window into a perspective, I'm not saying that I'm gonna watch this movie all the time.
Okay, I get that.
You know? So yeah, no, like, I liked it, but also, like, coolio. And one and done.
Okay, I'm gonna go 3.5.
Oh, okay.
I think that there are a lot of merits to the story. I think it is interesting, and I think that it also has a lot of revisit value for a lot of reasons that maybe even extend beyond the meat of the film itself.
Yeah, but you know me. I'm not really a Holden Caulfield kind of a person.
No, yeah.
And our lead is pretty much a Holden Caulfield for me, and I just can't.
You struggle with that, I get that.
No, yeah. Like, what do you have to be so angry about? Calm down. Your life is fine.
Yeah, especially compared to some of our next film.
Oh, yeah.
So, our next film is Blackboard Jungle, and as always, we have a clip, so take a listen.
You are now listening to Rock Around the Clock. This is the theme music from MGM's sensational new picture, Blackboard Jungle. Many people said the story could not, must not, dared not be shown. The picture already has the movie and book world gasping. Blackboard Jungle deals with an explosive subject, the teenage terror in the schools. It is the frankest, the toughest, the most realistic film since On the Waterfront. It is fiction, but fiction torn from big city modern savagery. It packs a brass-knuckle punch in its startling revelation of those teenage savages who turned big city schools into a clawing jungle.
So, that was Blackboard Jungle from 1955, directed by Richard Brooks, written by Richard Brooks, adapted from a novel, The Blackboard Jungle, by Evan Hunter, starring Glenn Ford, Anne Francis, Lewis Calhern, Margaret Hayes, and Sidney Poitier. A very young Sidney Poitier before he went on and won lots of Oscars and that sort of thing. Broke history as the first black man to win an Oscar for acting.
Yeah, he did.
The premise of the film is a new English teacher at a violent, unruly inner-city school is determined to do his job, despite resistance from both students and faculty. How'd I do on the voice?
I think you did a marvelous, darling. Absolutely marvelous.
Thank you. So this movie is from the same year, and it's from the same wave. Even though this movement started again in the late 40s of the social consciousness sort of films, even though it started back then, it definitely carried into now, and it's very present in this movie because it starts with a message from the filmmakers saying that they want you to take the issue of delinquency seriously, and that though this is fiction, you know, this is meant to promote change and thought about this problem in America.
Well, honestly, you can feel it throughout the whole thing. They
Yeah.
are really serious about, like, you know, making sure that this, unlike the other movie, isn't like there's no jokes here.
No.
We're not joking with this subject by any stretch of the word. You know, like the clip says, it's ultra realistic feeling. More so than the other one, I'd say.
No, absolutely. So, do you want me to start this one?
Sure.
All right. Ultimately, I really liked this one. I think you're right. This one tackles into that sort of, again, that pseudo-documentary feel that we were talking about. And whereas Rebel Without a Cause was filmed in LA, in CinemaScope, in color, which was still a pretty, revolutionary process for the time, and ultra-wide was definitely a big deal for the time. This thing is done either on location or on very small sets in New York, and it's black and white, and it's very much grittier, and it isn't told from the perspective of the teenager to try and empathize into their perspective. This one is told from the perspective of the authority figures who want to empathize but just can't in any way.
Yeah.
And as I watched it, I really liked it a lot, and it also kind of broke my heart on a certain level because there were so many ways where I still saw essentially the exact same problems in 1955 school as was present in my school when I was a teacher. People who just don't get the kids, who also assume the worst of the kids and assume that the kids can't do better. And even though some of this movie was definitely probably hyper exaggerated and a little bit overly glamorized, it felt pretty, comparatively, I think, for me, comparatively to Rebel Without a Cause, this did feel like it was trying to ground it in something a little bit more real. And also with that, I think a little bit more successfully painful at times, but also successfully rewarding at times. I think the emotional payoffs of this movie are way better.
No, I can completely agree with that. I really enjoyed this movie. It was tough getting those same struggles that we go through, like a cycle almost. I remember hearing you talk about school and, just wanting to teach and not understanding, how to get through to every student in every class. And I see the same things in this movie. It felt very grounded in the reality that, this is where these kids live. This is how these kids have been brought up, and breaking molds on every platform of the subject. I really enjoyed it. As I just give it a glowing review.
No, yeah, and I completely agree. It for me did at times feel kind of as long, or even maybe a little longer than Rebel Without a Cause, but I think that's also just because it was so much more dense. It was over, as opposed to, stretching 24 hours into this 1 hour, 50-minute experience of a bunch of teenagers being upset.
And doing teen things.
Like knife fights and car chases, car races, This is across an entire school year, and it's this struggle, this ongoing struggle. And on a certain level, maybe that's to the film's credit. It feels sometimes just as much of a trudgery as school can, at times it is just as damn it, if we can't just, get this thing a-going a little bit smoother, then everything would just be better,
Yeah.
But I thought the performances were great. Sidney Poitier did absolutely steal, almost every scene he was in. And the big star of the movie is Glenn Ford, our teacher. He was the big star of the movie. But Sidney Poitier absolutely blew the thing open. He steals every scene that he's in, and I thought that the teacher does the great job, the lead. I thought Glenn Ford did do a great job.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is very, I guess, how would you call it, what are they called? The blue, the Republican, no, damn it. The blue collar Democrat, that's what it's called, the blue collar Democrat, where you know, it's so progressive for the time. They're talking about stuff that I guess when I imagine the 50s in my mind, you know, we didn't talk about people losing babies or anything like that. You know, it was so pish posh, so hush hush, and this movie is like, no, racism is bad. You know, we have to be concerned about these things. We have to work as a community, you know, in order to get better. And like, sure, this movie has like, every movie I feel like to a certain extent has some aging issues, and there are some, like, you know, we're gonna punch a child, but it's usually a child who punched first. So but no, I really feel like we're almost kind of like watching just like an older version of like a similar time just play out right in this movie, where I'm like, yep, the same old struggles, same old, but like these are also the people who are like, no, let's not do still any of the things that even back in the 50s they wanted to do. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. No, because, like, essentially what I think that, you know, what she's getting at is that back in this movie, what Glenn Ford is kind of preaching, you know, at one point is, you know, you need to stop looking at these kids as animals. And, like, are there some bad kids, like, you know, here that maybe, you know, aren't going to ever circle around? Sure, but what you need to do is you need to get the ones that you can reach out to, you need to reach out to them, you know, and you need to pull them onto your side, and you need to engage with these kids, and you need to understand their community and where they're coming from, and you need to reach out to them in ways that are impactful and meaningful to them. You know, if you want to get them thinking the way that you want them to think, you have to find the things that are going to spark their brain. And all the times, you know, I would hear, you know, oh, kids can't do that. You know, these kids can't do that. These kids can't learn that.
Why? Because they live in this neighborhood? That's presumptuous.
And so, but, and so I think to what my wife was saying was that there isn't really that much of a dissimilarity in some of the struggles that that people have been facing for a long time. And we could, you know, potentially do some of these things moving forward, and I think that she just sometimes is very frustrated by the lack of momentum, and how it can sometimes very much seem that we are still fighting the same battles that we were fighting then. But I think that that's also kind of why I liked doing this episode, was because it did highlight how even though some of the content and some of the context and some of the touchstones have changed, the arguments and the undertones and the underpinnings have not.
Yeah, and I love getting to go back and watch the things that for somebody was new and exciting and interesting, and getting to see a glimpse of the things that they, you know, how they lived their lives and how they deemed worthy, you know, to portray, I guess, different types of society in different ways, and how we can use that to grow as a society instead of just repeating the same kind of conflict and non-resolution, I guess, that we've been doing for so long. But I loved watching these movies. I always love going back and watching old stuff. You know me. I usually stop in the 80s. So yay, 50s movies. Huzzah. Teenagedom hasn't really changed, guys. Honestly, that's all I learned from watching these movies, is that we all go through angsty phases where we think our parents don't understand, but they've totally been there, just a different version of there. And we all just have to take a breath and learn to listen to each other better.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As a random aside, beyond also, you know, having I'm sure, you know, a modern and divisive message, even by today's standards. It was also divisive back then, with some people saying that the story matter of the story, I'm such an idiot. With some people saying that the story was almost too melodramatic, too fantastical, too out there to possibly make any of its claims believable or worth listening to.
Ha! I think that that's hysterical. If only I could bring these people to the modern age.
To the point where kids are coming to school with clear backpacks.
Yeah,
because
and walking through like metal detectors and stuff. Yeah, no, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Mm-hmm. But also, this is the system that made our present possible.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you make great points, and I think that this was a great. I think it was a great little movie and a great little window. And even if some of the film's elements are a little bit overly sensationalized, I think that ultimately it does have a good core and a good grounded... I think it also has a good grounded cast and good grounded portrayals that really help keep the film from just being some melodramatic crap kind of teen message movie, because it could be a Reefer Madness kind of thing where it's like so ludicrous in its messaging, but I think that it manages to walk it well.
Yeah, I think that this movie is very like personable. Like, I can relate to these people in a way that I couldn't relate to what what was his name? Jim was going through in the last movie.
Jim Stark.
Yeah, because I kept making Iron Man jokes. That's right.
And as a little fun fact, this movie in 2016 was marked for preservation by the Library of Congress. Blackboard Jungle was.
Oh, nice.
For the National Film Registry. So there's a little fun fact for you.
Yeah, I think this was a little gem of history, honestly.
So what would you give Blackboard Jungle out of 5?
See, and I was gonna give this one like a 4.
Okay. Are you still standing by that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still. Well, I was like, you gave the other one a really high score, and I was like, oh crap, I didn't want to be reversed on this one too.
No, I'm gonna give this one a 4.
Oh, perfect! Yay, 2 4s coming at you live.
No, I liked this quite a bit.
Yay! Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's kind of our overarching thing on teenagers. I guess if I did have to say anything, it's that teenagers are, at the end of the day, people. They are early forming people, and they need to be treated as such. And the way that you're going to do that is with respect, and also with grounding it, and shooting them straight, and being honest with them. In my every class, every teacher has one class that is like their more difficult class. Even in a class or in a school full of nothing but great kids, there will always be one class that is comparatively your more difficult class. And I think that in my class that I could sometimes have a little bit more of a struggle with, especially as a first year teacher. One of the things that really helped change some of the dynamics of that was when I started to help some students and they started to see some of their grades positively turn around, because it was essentially a sort of remedial class for kids who had failed one of the state assessments. And one of the big changes that I saw in that class behaviorally was when they started to pass the assessment that they failed the year before and weren't going to have, like, that was a big change in our relationship in that class, Yeah,
because it's not only just like a positive growth of within the system, but also, it's a personal growth, because achievement is the best kind of reward. Grades are great, giving somebody your praise is great, but having that for yourself, I think, is the biggest motivator.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's always hard and you do have to be patient, and I wasn't always, the most patient as a teacher. And teaching is a hard job.
Yeah.
But teachers and students are both, at the end of the day, people, and I think both of them, the message, I think, at the end of Blackboard Jungle is respect in both directions goes a long way. Mm-hmm. And I think that probably is still very resonant today.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Mm-hmm. Moving on,
cool.
In some slightly other directions, if we may.
Mm-hmm, of course.
We recently had the trailer released for Matrix Resurrections, the upcoming Wachowski fourth Matrix installment. Mm-hmm. It's the same trailer, I believe, that was debuted at CinemaCon last week. It matches the trailer description that we got. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on it?
Oh gosh, sorry. I feel like my thoughts are not going to be like anything related to the actual thing. Keanu, what is going on with your hair right now? This is like the fourth trailer for a movie that I've seen this year where you have the same just like I didn't give a fuck today hairstyle.
I think this is just how he's living.
Okay, I mean I guess that's fine, but like, I don't know, what happened to costuming? I other than that, it looks just like another Matrix movie. It looks like a movie where they were like, hey, people liked the Matrix, let's bring it back, but like throw a little bit of Ready Player One in it. I don't know. I'm on the fence.
No, that's fair. So the trailer pretty much shows pretty classic Matrix stuff. I wouldn't say that it gets too much into the plot. It looks like Keanu, Tom Anderson, is having to escape from the Matrix again. And that seems to be what it is. And except this time without Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, but a different black guy in sunglasses who's given me a lot of Lawrence Fishburne vibes. So It's almost like, it's almost like they're trying to just do that.
It's almost like Lawrence didn't feel up to getting into fighting shape. And so they were like, we're just gonna move on without him.
Honestly, with all of this digital nonsense that we keep doing to people's faces and their bodies...
Maybe he didn't want to come back. Maybe he was smart.
I mean, maybe, but like also, there's really no excuse. They can do anything with digital editing nowadays.
But maybe he was the smart one of the group. Maybe he was the one that was like, you know what?
I'm out. Because, like, it feels like, if I can, guesstimate, it feels like this movie's going to be like him in the Matrix, having visions of the past and being reminded of people and why do I recognize this woman's face? It's because we've had a whole future past life together. Nonsense mamba jamma. He's going to get back into the thing and then they're going to make a whole new movie franchise out of this. We're going to have 6 new movies, 10 TVs, shows, and all the nonsense because it's never going to end.
That's fair. So this one is written exclusively by Lana Wachowski.
Okay.
Lily is not, I guess, involved in the writing and directing of this one. So this is also the first Matrix film that is a solo outing for the Wachowskis. This might be their first solo outing directing. This might be her first solo outing directing ever without her sister. Because they did like all 3 of the original Matrix together. They did Speed Racer. I think they did Speed Racer together. They did Cloud Atlas. They did Jupiter Ascending.
Wait, you said the Speed Racer? You mean like that remake movie of that old...
Anime, yeah.
Oh.
And yeah, Jupiter Ascending, Cloud Atlas. And this feels like Jupiter Ascending, Cloud Atlas, Wachowskis doing the Matrix. This doesn't feel like the Wachowskis going back to the filmmakers that made those first 3 movies. This feels like the people who have now made Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending, which are these big, I'm going to call them CGI operas kind of a thing. now doing that with The Matrix.
So
And also,
I was right with saying it is the Ready Player One.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit.
Oh.
Well, and also there was a lot of color coding to the point that I maybe you didn't notice it, but I saw Neil Patrick Harris, and obviously he's taking blue pills, which are the ones that are supposed to keep him in the Matrix.
Yeah.
But then, like, Neil Patrick Harris had, like, the blue
and he had, like,
pill-like glasses
Yeah, and he had, like, a blue
on.
sweater or something on.
And then
yeah,
there's the chick who shows up with blue hair, and I'm like, okay, so she must also be an agent of the Matrix, But maybe that's also just double blind, but that's also part of the problem, I guess, when, like, you're just doing, like, a whole bunch of stuff visually already. There were times where I was like, is it that she can be trusted? And, like, obviously we'll figure out when we see the movie, but it just,
This is an entire franchise where I have to go, all right, let's just start over again. So Matrix 1 rewatch. Because, like, all of the details are just so all over the place now. And this thing didn't really help. It just showed me all of the things that I already knew about the Matrix that I was supposed to look out for. And, yeah, so, I don't know.
At least it has Jonathan Groff.
Oh, well, I always like Jonathan Groff.
Mm-hmm. At least it has Jonathan Groff, so...
Everybody gets one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also watched, and we don't have to talk too much about it, we watched a trailer for Malignant as well, the new James Wan horror movie.
Oh, yeah,
It looks alright.
Yeah, it looks fine. I have no idea what this movie's about. It looks like...
My general thought is that she literally willed her own haunting. That she, like, made an imaginary friend, and maybe even that, like, she eventually cut off the imaginary friend, and maybe it started to haunt her as a child, and then she, like, got rid of it, but now it's back.
Well, yeah, because it's the whole, like, the Hill House thing where you gotta go back to your trauma place, and because your psychologist said so. Like, that's what it looked like, where she was like, I gotta go back to my family home and do the trauma stuff.
Well, and what's interesting is, no offense to James Wan, but he was like, I'm trying to do something new, and when I was watching this, I was like, no, this feels pretty James Wan-ish. It's a person who is haunted by something that isn't a typical haunting, but it is still at its core a haunting that's related to some suppressed part of their childhood that is now bursting into their present life again, causing them new issues once more.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe it's got something more in store.
I hope so, and, like, don't get me wrong, like, I hope that my tone doesn't say, I could be pleasantly surprised by this movie. By all means, just currently, with the trailer, it looks like just, another horror movie. It looks like another thing that might make me jump a few times, and, like, I'll walk away going, I don't remember any of the leads' names.
Former guest Clark Collis saw it, and he said that he seemed to like it.
Okay.
So, who knows? Perhaps we'll enjoy it. I think it's coming out this Friday, actually.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So we could maybe give that a watch.
Yeah. Give everything a chance.
By the way, I meant to mention this. Rebel Without a Cause is on HBO Max, if you want to watch it. And Blackboard Jungle is available to rent for, like, $2.99.
No, it was, or was that on sale because of our thing?
It was on sale at the time. Its regular renting price is $2.99, so I don't want to tell people that we rented it for 99 cents and then have them go and be like, it's $2.99. It is normally $2.99 to rent.
Just do it literally right now. Stop what you're doing, turn off this podcast.
Unless, of course, it's already gone.
Well, then, drop that $3. You've done that in-app purchase today of more, so...
But yeah, so that's kind of news on trailers. Not too terribly much sort of, I think, big media news that's worth discussing beyond that.
Oh, that's so nice. Sometimes you just don't really want to have, like, a lot of news.
Yeah.
I mean, that could just be me.
Beyond that, I would also like to give a little shout out. We're recording on September 9th, but the episode's coming out tomorrow, September 10th. And so that means that it's my sister's birthday.
Woo!
So happy birthday to my sister. She's pretty awesome. Maybe I'll try and have her on the show sometime. I'm trying to get a friend of hers on who works in production, but we'll have to see where that goes. But happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday!
Last thing, let's talk about what we've been watching. Honestly, we've kind of been doing a random assortment of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, let's see, new stuff other than, like, Film Buds things. We watched Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar.
Yeah. We watched Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar, which was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, we had a great time.
Yeah. We kind of just went into it thinking, you know, it'll be a Kristen Wiig comedy, and we'll have some fun because it's a straightforward comedy, and people it seems to be getting positive feedback, and we ended up having an absolute ball.
Yeah, honestly, blown away. I think
Yeah.
that this is probably my new favorite Kristen Wiig performance, of in a while.
Yeah, and it's right in that same vein as some of the weird, out there, goofy, dumb kind of Will Ferrell, stupid but smart movie choices of, like, you know, Anchorman, Step Brothers, stuff like that. I think that it's in that same energy.
Yeah.
Wayne's World,
Yeah, but
Dumb
I
and
think
Dumber.
that it's doing it more earnestly instead
Yeah.
of, like, ironically, and so, like, it's actually funny instead of it being like, oh, I see that they're trying to do a joke here.
Yeah.
Delightful.
No, for sure. And they're not trying to do their versions of those characters or those character archetypes. It's just two,
It's like
in their own
yeah,
special
it's
way, goofy, sometimes dumb characters.
Yeah, it's like a buddy comedy, except, you know, this time it's these two female friends who are coworkers and who just, like, you know, have bonded, and they're absolutely hilarious.
But it was a really good time. We did it for date night, and it was a lot of fun. So we definitely recommend it.
Yeah, highly.
Also watched more
Legend
nature.
of Korra.
Oh yeah, we watched more Legend of Korra. We've been watching a few nature docs. We recently watched an episode of The Hunt on Discovery, which is all about predator-prey dynamics and predators and the difficulty of hunting, and how many failed attempts there are at hunting and why, and that sort of thing. And it was really good. It's a David Attenborough documentary, so
you know it's gonna be good. It's got his nice, soothing British voice just to, like, you know, lull ya.
So we've been very much enjoying that. The other thing we did, it was a rewatch for me. It was her first time seeing it. We only did one episode. Wormwood, the Errol Morris
Yes,
documentary.
yes.
What did you think of that?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. I didn't really know what you just kind of put it on, so I started watching it without any context, which was fine because I caught up eventually. It kind of starts almost in the middle of a story. I really enjoyed it. It was weird knowing that this thing happened in real life and that nobody knew about it for like 25 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Because of government stuff.
Yeah. The MK Ultra experiments and some of the release of information that happened in the 70s is also when you get some of the reveal of some of the COINTELPRO operations and things like that happened as well.
Yeah.
You get a lot of document reveals and leaks in the 70s, and it is partially because of the distrust and because of the, you know, this attitude of, well, if they're doing this, what else are they doing? And so it's a great documentary. Errol Morris is an incredible documentarian. He's been around for a long time. He's the one who first started using... He's the one who really pioneered recreation, dramatic recreation in documentaries.
Yeah, it really felt almost kind of like a 24 hours or the 48 hours show that used to come on, except, you know, with better casting.
Yeah. And in his first thing that he used recreation for, it was Thin Blue Line, which was about a crime and people who were incarcerated for it, and the conflicting narratives that you had around some of the events of the night of the crime. And he used recreation to sometimes show how thin the line was between, you know, truth and perception. And so, you know, a character would, or not a character, but a person in the documentary would be like, oh, you know, the person drove away in a black whatever. And they would show it And then later on, someone would be like, and the person drove away in a blue this. And then from the exact same angle that the last one was shown, in the same lighting conditions, they would show a blue make of the car. Mm-hmm. And then they would also sometimes, show the two of them back together. And he does a lot of things to draw your attention and play with and highlight words and ideas and specific parts of the text that he wants you to focus on. So like the whole fell or jumped in the first episode of Wormwood, where he's flipping this image.
Oh yeah, and the screen does that like mirroring break where it's like he's just repeating it over and over again. It was very effective. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, because the sentence is essentially this guy being like, fell or jumped, and I spent years arranging how those words, could sort of mean similar things to each other, and what all those words could mean. And so they take that like sentence and then they just tile it out and multiply it.
Yeah. No, I also, with times changing, how long it took them to get this information out, because the fell or jumped thing wouldn't have even been a problem nowadays with technology and with how far we've advanced as a society. We could definitely figure out how you got from point A to point B in which direction now. Whereas like they were like, this is official.
Yeah.
It is an or.
Yeah. But no, absolutely incredible. And it also shows how little tiny events matriculate and find their way back up the ladder to big names and big people, because ultimately very casually name dropped in this episode are how two people who were aware of this were Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. By the time we hit the 70s, who arranged for the shady deal that took away their ability to sue.
Yeah, for them meeting the president and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so that even folds into the modern day narrative of what we know of some of the shady things that Rumsfeld and Cheney did.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to see where all of these pocket events also in history fit into a larger landscape of other abuses and things that were happening at the time and
honestly,
echoes in history.
I love like uncovering these little truths, because at the end of the day, these were things that we were never going to be taught in school, because if the people who have done wrong in history wanted us to know all of their dirty laundry, then it would be in the books.
Yeah, that's a fact.
And so like let's rip it all away. Let's discover what it truly means to be a part of this nation, to be an American in this sense, because our history is not something to run away from. It defines us, and that way we can move past it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've been watching is Looming Tower, which is, of course, it's based on a book called Looming Tower, which is about the book is about the events leading up to 9/11, tracking specific people from Afghanistan and other various parts of the world, as well as tracking the trajectory of certain people in the American intelligence apparatus, and how all of these events and timelines and strings lead to 9/11. And the show focuses pretty much exclusively, it does investigate all of the things that lead to it, I'm sure. But primarily it focuses on the U.S. intelligence apparatus. And we've watched 2 or 3 episodes of that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I really enjoy it. I feel like I say that about a lot of things. Start out everything with I really enjoy it. 9/11 is a tough subject, and I don't know if I'll ever personally be able to not say that. But I think that this show does a really good job of giving the facts as plainly and, with some dramatization, of course, for show appeal. To kind of separate, I guess, for me a little bit of it, and so that I can get all the information in and understand what happened without just like it being a whole series of like watching the towers go down. and I don't think that I would be able to handle that, and I'm really glad that they didn't do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think whenever you're doing movies about tragedy, about trauma, about a big event like that, there are always debates around waiting period of when it's safe to discuss it, and certain things I don't think matter as much. Deepwater Horizon, I think it was totally fine when the movie for Deepwater Horizon, for me as a viewer, came out compared to when the Deepwater Horizon event happened. Mm-hmm. The Boston Marathon bombing was maybe a little bit more on the too soon side, and I could certainly understand people having that opinion. 9/11 is one that people tried to touch, I feel like, pretty quickly after. And
well,
people,
that movie came out. That was like the day of kind of event where
the World Trade Center movie with Nick Cage.
Yeah, where he's like trying to dig people out.
Yeah,
and that came pretty close after, I think.
Yeah,
within that like 10-year bubble.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And so there were a few that came out. There was, I think, one of the earliest two that I can remember, even earlier than that one, that stirred up a lot of controversy. The first one was Remember Me, I think it was called, which was the Robert Pattinson romance movie with the surprise ending where, like, his, if I'm not mistaken, it was this movie where, like, the surprise ending is that his dad works in the World Trade Center, and he, like, goes to talk to his dad, like, about his relationship and stuff like that.
Oh,
and, like,
what?
It turns out that it's, like, 9/11.
Oh,
and
no.
I'm pretty sure that this was, like, a
no.
whole thing that happened. I could be wrong.
That's fine. I think that my subconscious knew that I didn't need to know that this movie existed, and I missed it entirely in real time.
And then another one was the movie United 93 from director Paul Greengrass, I think, who directed Bourne Ultimatum, Bourne Supremacy, Green Zone, some other things. And it was all about the plane that ends up not going into the Trade Center or the Pentagon, but the one that ended up falling into the field in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And that movie got a lot of heat just because of how soon it was, but actually, like, it's a pretty, as far as depictions go, it's a pretty good one. He made this very conscious effort to not use anyone's names.
Okay.
So instead it is truly just this kind of story of these survivors choosing, you know, to try and do something in these insurmountable odds. Mm-hmm. And the sacrifice that they end up making as a result of that.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly a tough film, but I think that it's probably done more respectfully than a lot of other movies.
Than this Robert Pattinson romance movie?
I think that's what it is. Or, like, you know, for another example of one that's pretty distasteful of something that was tragic, the Hilary Duff horror movie of, like, the murder of Sharon Tate.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, there are definitely more and less tasteful ways of doing that, and that's another point that I have about anything that is trying to, because it's kind of like the Holocaust. Like, you are probably going to have people who do movies about the Holocaust. How tasteful those movies are up to the filmmakers themselves. Mm-hmm. And we're now hitting a point where, you know, 9/11 was 20 years ago this year. And for several of my students, when 9/11 happened,
none of them were born.
None of them were born. None of them really seemed interested. It didn't seem to register with them. It wasn't until actually my more difficult class that someone finally was like, "You remember 9/11?" And it's like, yeah, sure do.
It was a school day, you know.
But I think that we're now hitting that point of finally being sort of comfortable enough to talk about it. You know, I know that it's a weird place for me. I remember it very vividly. I was living near the field in Pennsylvania. I was in West Virginia at the time, but I was about 40 minutes from that field in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. DC was just right nearby, you know, a day's drive or so, less than. So, like, I remember it being a very big time. I remember it being a very big deal, and I remember all of the years, obviously, after, and all of the consequences of those actions, some of which we've only just now started to kind of try and disengage from. And, but But I think that people are finally getting to that point of feeling comfortable enough to talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
I think that it was a really hard thing for a lot of people, and I'm sure that for some more directly affected, it still is not for them probably something that they're totally comfortable talking about. But I think that collectively, nationally, we're probably more ready for films about it and, you know, discussions on the topic.
Well, I mean, we also have more information now than we did, and I think that that's something to be said about a lot of movies that come right after huge events in history that are, I think, too quickly done, is that we don't have all of the information, we don't have all of the facts yet, and I think it's hilarious when you get to see that movie out of context and go, well, now this whole section isn't quite true anymore. You know, with new information that came if you had just waited a few more years. So let's not have any more COVID movies come out anytime soon. I'm just saying. Thanks. I'm not interested.
No, that's fair. It is too soon for COVID movies. What I was gonna also say was that we were considering doing a full 9/11 episode, and we ended up having some stuff get in the way of that, and so I apologize for that not happening. But we ended up doing this back to school episode, and which had been on our calendar, but we just moved it forward. I think one thing that I did notice, interestingly, is even in the 9/11 content that we did consume, was how there are so many issues across different socio-political topics and backdrops and battlegrounds where we have repeated mistakes and echoes of the same conversations and the same things and ideas happening. And it really does make it a little bit of a hard pill to swallow when you go and watch a movie from the 50s that is echoing so many ideas that people are saying today about schools. And it's a little bit hard when you go and learn about decisions that were made in countries like Afghanistan and other countries abroad where, you know, the United States meddled in certain directions or ended up causing circumstances that ended up having unintended consequences that you have to ask yourself, you know, was it worth the benefit of the involvement? And that's as far into that discussion as I'll go, but it's a hard pill to handle, to go back and see how little we have learned. Are there ways that we have learned and grown? Yes. Are there ways that our fundamental basics are still flawed? Yes. And I think that that's evident in both of these content fields.
No, yeah, completely, honestly. It really just, you know, we have to stop forgetting.
Yeah.
We like to do this thing where, like, every 50 years we have, like, a nice, like, I don't know, societal cleanse of history, and we go, all right, I don't need the 1800s anymore. We'll just get rid of it, and we'll skip ahead in all textbooks in school, and we'll start school learning here, you know? So, yeah, no, it just starts with us constantly being, like, aware of these things and learning actually from the things that happen in our past instead of having to perpetuate these narratives and these problems in order to be like, aha, next time's the time. Let's not have a next time. Let's have it be this time. Let's break the cycle.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, that's honestly sort of all that we have. You know, I really enjoyed this. I hope that everyone is enjoying their school year. I hope that everyone is staying safe this school year. Dear, thank you as always for coming on.
Of course.
Did you have a good time?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry that we were so long-winded this time.
No, they're fine. No, but thank you, dear, for coming on. Thank you for listening. As always, please go like, subscribe. You know what? Actually, on our Twitter, Film Buds, I did put up a little poll. I'll share the final results of the poll next week, but I did put up a poll on what is your favorite teen movie, Rebel Without a Cause, Breakfast Club, Clueless, or Mean Girls. Currently, our winner is Mean Girls. So, if you want Clueless to win, like I'm sure many of you do, go and vote. Follow us at Film Buds on Twitter, the Film Buds Podcast on Instagram. You can send us listener questions at thefilmbudspodcast@gmail.com. And, as always, thanks for listening. Keep watching. Bye.
Bye.